Hi, my name is Anviksha and I'm so sorry for that goofy, entertaining intro. My name is Anviksha Singh and this is the first long form video of my YouTube channel, and this is going to be a sort of a mini intro video but mostly a yab about the whole hoax called as therapy culture. Like, what do I perceive about therapy and what I think about psychiatry, and I am going to talk about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, apparently the whole world is convinced that this mass wave of despair, like this existential loneliness and this existential angst and this kind of meaninglessness and the kind of loss of eroticism in life. When I say the word eroticism, I don't necessarily mean in the context of sex or sexual engagement. What I mean here is that eroticism has a very integral component called as mystique, intrigue, mystery. That is so very important to the concept of eroticism, and that is something that is greatly eroding from our lives, because at one end we have all the kinds of sellers of hope and all the kinds of sellers of predictability who want to tell us that, you know, go ahead, pursue this course and your life is set. Go ahead, marry this person and your life is set. Go ahead, eat this and your problems are gone. Go ahead, put this cream and your blemishes are gone. Go ahead, read this and your mindlessness is gone. Go ahead, watch that movie and your Sunday blues are gone. You see, the whole market has given you very effective, cost effective, time effective, distance effective kind of options to you in like multiple choices, and choosing that has apparently become the new model of liberation, new model of independence. But ladies and gentlemen, having choices is not enough. Having the right choices is the most important thing in life. And apparently, in a world which is so much mired with hyper depressive tendency, which where this I remember there was this particular YouTube video. I will put that in the link, which was consisting of Gayatri Spivak and two other scholars who were talking about postmodernism. And Gayatri Spivak says that postmodernism is basically radical acceptance of despair. And I get it. The postmodernist society, postmodernism is the neoliberal, or it is basically the cultural logic of neoliberalism as stated by Mark Fisher. I will put this all. Um, what is neoliberalism? You require to know these stuff so that you can be with me, and as I yap further, you will be able to rope back these terms. So I'll just make it clear for you. So neoliberalism is the most accelerated form of capitalism, wherein you see that production is increased on a manifold level, okay, and consumption is what defines culture, which largely defines our policy. It is not the policy which is deriving the consumption, but rather consumption solely mattering in the most realistic senses for a policy too. And it is basically accelerated in the sense that now there's going to be hyper level of market competitiveness, and there's going to be a lot of free market and everything like that, being visible, being legible, being comparable. All these things are sorted for our products into the market on a large scale. Everything is becoming multicultural, yada yada yada. That is neoliberalism for you. By the way, the idea of neoliberalism was pushed in a very interesting context in political history. And there's a reason मैं क्यों कहती हूँ कि औरतें उतनी ही खराब हो सकती हैं पॉलिटिक्स में जितने मर्द हो सकते हैं. इसका रीज़न है मार्गरेट थैचर. मार्गरेट थैचर and George W. Bush did this thing called as neoliberalism during the Iraq War, and they basically wanted to profiteer a lot, because the whole point of neoliberalism is to make and to like produce so that you consume, and that's it. So in order to drive this constant cycle of consumption, you require people to make consumption as a part of their whole identity. Now, this is a very interesting and a very important line. Flag it in your head, ladies and gentlemen. Consumption has to be made as the most central thing about your whole existence. As long as you're consuming, you should be considered as an active, respectful, useful citizen of the democracy, because you are consuming, because you're producing so that you can consume even more. Now that exactly proves why we have education institutions which would rather talk more about placements than what they are teaching. This explains why we still have dowry deaths. The world has changed, but something hasn't still changed, and that has been the human greed. And human greed is exactly what lubricates the wheels of neoliberalism. Because what else can drive you to consume 24 by 7 than not greed? But then greed has to be something which is intrinsically and spiritually invested to us, and that is by this very thing called as loneliness, and I will come back to it. So you see, postmodernism in many ways becomes this cultural logic wherein there is an absolute breaking of the objective truth. So suddenly, I cannot say that A, B, C or like XYZ sentence is absolutely true or it's universally true. Like truth has to be absolute. This cannot be no longer the case. The self, the identity, the nation state, your idea of religion, your idea of everything, in fact the idea of idea itself, everything has to be fragmented on the basis of idea that everything can have multiplicity of meanings. And guess which kind of political system allows people to be most postmodernist? Democracy, liberal democracy. That would allow us people to do it. Now, making it even more clear for you. So पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म मोटा मोटी, अगर आप समझ रहे हैं, थोड़ा थोड़ा समझ रहे हैं, तो पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म मोटा मोटी न्यू लिबरलिज्म को हवा दे रहा है कि अब एक सामाजिक तौर पे खूब सारे लोग कंजम्पशन के लिए मरे जा रहे हैं, जो कि बच्चे भी इसीलिए कर रहे हैं ताकि वो फ्यूचर में एक अच्छा कंजम्पशन यूनिट बन पाए. कल्चर भी क्या है? कल्चर उन लोगों के लिए वो नहीं है जो आप समझते हैं अबाउट ट्रेडिशन, अबाउट रिलीजन्स, अबाउट वैल्यूज एंड द वैल्यूज, ट्रेडिशंस एंड आइडियाज रूटेड ऑन एन एब्सोल्यूट ट्रूथ. नो, फॉर द न्यू लिबरलिस्ट दिस इज द बिगेस्ट प्रॉब्लम. They do not want us all together, yet they also want us together, only tied by the ways of consumption. So, until and unless the self is not fragmented, the meaning is not fragmented, the life is not fragmented, and everything has been compartmentalized systematically to erode the very essence of universalism, which is something our Vedas have always taught about, and something which I also personally believe in, is that the truth is absolute and that everything is interrelated to the universal subconsciousness. But this idea has to be eroded because it stands in way of neoliberalism, because then people won't be consuming 24 by 7 mindlessly, because they would realize that the whole pipeline, the global pipeline by which people consume, is filled with lots of debauchery, pain, lots of violence. आपके शीन के कपड़े जिसको पहन के आप बैडी बनने की कोशिश करते हो, वो शीन के कपड़े बांग्लादेश के थर्ड वर्ल्ड नेशन पे एक भूखी माँ और भूखा बच्चा मिलके बना रहे होते हैं, तो उनके लेबर के ऊपर आप वो कर रहे हो. एंड दिस ब्रिंग्स ऑल दोज आइडियाज ऑफ कैपिटलिज्म, मार्क्सिज्म, फेमिनिज्म, सारे प्रकार की इज्म दोस्तों इसी चीज़ पे आके बंध जाते हैं. अब आज मैंने आपसे बात करी थी कि साइकियाट्री और साइकोलॉजी, दोस्तों है तो ये बड़ा ही लंबा टॉपिक और मैं एक या वीडियो में तो बता नहीं पाऊंगी, लेकिन मैं जितना बता सकती हूँ अपने एक्सपीरियंस के साथ. Therapy culture is a hoax because therapy culture by default works on the idea of multiplicity of meaning. Since it basically therapy, or in many ways psychology has become a discipline of intellectualizing the kind of spiritual or the psychic harvest people feel in the whole machination of the neoliberal capitalist society. To be very frank, आप समझ रहे हैं दोस्तों, देखा जाए तो कैपिटलिज्म अनआयरॉनिकली उतना ही यूनिवर्सली सबकॉन्शियस है जितना कोई और सिस्टम होता. बिकॉज आफ्टर ऑल पूरी दुनिया इस मल्टी कल्चरल प्रोडक्शन सिस्टम से ही तो जुड़ी हुई है। आपके शीन के कपड़े जिसको पहन के आप बैडी महसूस करते हो, वो कपड़े आ रहे हैं बांग्लादेश से, लेकिन जो कपड़े हैं ये पहन रही है ब्रिटेन की बैडी। तो आप समझ रहे कितना लंबा चेन है जिससे ये इतने इतने सारे लोग जुड़े हुए हैं, राइट। नाउ द पॉइंट इज, थेरेपी कल्चर, इस पाइपलाइन में जितने भी स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं, जिसमें आपकी कंज्यूमर्स आ गए, भांति भांति प्रकार के कंज्यूमर, देखा जाए तो हर एक स्टेक होल्डर पूरे कैपिटलिस्ट सोसाइटी में कंज्यूमर भी है, प्रोड्यूसर भी है। कंज्यूमर ज़्यादा होता है, प्रोड्यूसर थोड़े कम होते हैं, इसीलिए अब आप देखते हैं कि लोग उतना ज़्यादा प्रोड्यूस नहीं कर रहे होते जितना वो कंज्यूम कर रहे होते हैं, बिकॉज ऑफ द टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट। तो अब घर में हर एक इंसान कपड़े नहीं बो रहा होता है, हर इंसान फार्मिंग नहीं कर रहा होता है, बिकॉज दे कैन कंज्यूम इट by buying it from the market. So you see, specialization, compartmentalization of production is also very unironically a very integral part of capitalism, because the moment people start uncompartmentalizing, or they basically start untying these rigid laces of production, they might actually become, or they might actually prove to be more self sufficient. So, what exactly happens when you go for a therapy? देखिए दोस्तों, थेरेपी कल्चर में क्या है कि थेरेपी और साइकोलॉजी, एज आई सेड, इट इज एन इंटेलेक्चुअलाइजिंग ऑफ दिस मास डिस्पेयर विच इज फेस्ड बाय ऑल द स्टेक होल्डर्स इन दिस मल्टी लेयर, मल्टी कंट्री, मल्टी कल्चरल प्रोडक्शन टाइम्स। इसमें हर एक व्यक्ति, जो इंसान डिप्रेस्ड, एंशियस, भांति भांति प्रकार के मनोरोगी या जितने भी आपके मन से जितनी प्रॉब्लम उनको फेस करते हैं, उसी का एक प्रकार से एक इंटेलेक्चुअल कह सकते हैं एक एक्सप्लेनेशन है। बट यहाँ पे तकलीफ क्या है कि दे गो ऑन टू मेडिकलाइज these problems by stating as if these problems are purely biological, and this is where I have the biggest problem. There is a reason हमारे माँ बाप क्यों कहते हैं कि हमारे टाइम पे डिप्रेशन नहीं हुआ करता था, बिकॉज आपके माँ बाप मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम, अगर आप इस समय ये वीडियो देख रहे हैं, आपके माँ बाप के समय में लेट स्टेज कैपिटलिज्म उतना ज़्यादा जोर नहीं पकड़ा हुआ था, ठीक है। सो देयर इज अ रीजन व्हाई देयर वाजंट अ लार्ज स्केल डिस्पेयर, बिकॉज एनीवेज द कैपिटलिस्ट सिस्टम इज एक्सट्रीमली डीह्यूमनाइजिंग। पीपल डू नॉट फील एनीथिंग लेस देन बीइंग कमोडिटीज। अगर कोई व्यक्ति अपना शरीर नहीं बेच रहा है तो भी वो अपनी रूह को बेच रहा होता है किसी ऑफिस में या किसी जगह पे, और इससे बुरा तब होता है जब वो सब कुछ बेच रहे होते हैं लेकिन एक बड़े ही कम दाम के लिए, जिससे उनकी खुद की बेसिक नेसेसिटीज़ भी नहीं पूरी हो पाती। सो द मार्जिनलाइजेशन of the whole spiritual strength which a human carries is manifold, which makes people ultimately very depressed, sad, anxious, and इसके वजह से जितने में हमारे परिवार हैं, हमारे देश है, वो डिस्फंक्शन होते जा रहे हैं, और धीरे धीरे डेमोक्रेसी से हम कैसे पैथोक्रेसी की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं, इसका कोई हमें अंत ही नहीं मिल रहा, बिकॉज एवरीवन इज बाय डिफॉल्ट रिक्वायर्ड टू कंज्यूम, एंड इट इज अ रीजन व्हाई during even these moments of crucial breaking down of these structures emotionally, which is that when you have a breakdown in that office, or when you start crying in your classroom, or when you start saying कि I cannot stay in that place, that is an exact moment कि पूरा पाइपलाइन टूट रहा होता है। लेकिन हमारे ये साइकोलॉजी की बिरादरी जाती है और इस पाइपलाइन को फिक्स करने के लिए फिर से एक नई पाइपलाइन में एक नई पाइप जोड़ने की कोशिश करती है फॉर कंजम्पशन, बाय सेइंग यू कि आप ये फलानी दवाइयाँ लीजिए और इससे आप ठीक हो जाएंगे। Let's be frank, ladies and gentlemen, most of our mental health problems are not truly mental health problems, but they're more or less social problems. As someone who has been a part for it for some time, I have intimately seen what exactly happens. All these mental health hospitals are essentially the back door or the last refuge, or the last place where these people who are beginning to see those cracks and holes or those leakages in the pipeline, they are basically gathered on a large scale basis, and then also owing to the already existing social stigma, and then this another very twisted motive of capitalizing on their misery has basically made their lives even more worse. And there seems to be no escape to this hell. You require people to be sad so they can go ahead and keep the the shops of the big pharmaceuticals opening. They just require it. And what is even worse is that these problems are intimately linked to our cognitive functions. To to basically have any kind of manipulation there is something that can be a revolutionary breakthrough for the capitalist overlords to further aim or to further push their overconsumption narrative on us. ऐसा क्यों है कि लोग दवाइयाँ 10-10 साल की लेते हैं और तब भी उनकी प्रॉब्लम्स ठीक नहीं होती है, and they only tend to be more worse? This is a major problem that should be questioned. I cannot fully yap it. I think मैं इसके पार्ट्स बनाऊंगी फर्दर, बट अभी तो मैंने इस याप पे बस एक तरीके से मैं कहूँगी एक इंट्रो था ये, ठीक है. लेकिन आई पर्सनली फील वेरी क्लोज टू दिस थिंग, एंड आई विल फॉर एवर से दैट humans cannot be happy until humans do not come for humans. If you keep living your life for material goals, your life is liable to become miserable, because there is inherently something very beautifully conscious about the human soul that doesn't believe in this very acidic idea of materialism. Materialism believes that material is the end and be all, that the whole world can be assessed and can be predicted and can be understood on the ideas of materialism. They have gone ahead to basically interpret our histories, our current lives only on the lines of materialism, but never on the ideas of how spiritually harvested our souls are, or how many times in the history has the humankind faced this kind of existential trauma. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I will meet you in my second episode. I love this lip combo. Bye.